down dirty. I'm Larry. Today we're going to work on a 2021 JLUR Diesel, and we're going to make a new front bumper and a new front skid. And what we're going to do is we're going to narrow it down frame width wise, and we're going to put the factory LED lights in the lower skid underneath the front bumper. So it's going to be two separate pieces, so it's easier to access everything and work on. And what I'm working around is my factory winch plate that I'd already previously made for the factory Rubicon bumper, which I have to modify because I want to tuck things back a little bit, basically do a nose tuck on it. All right, let's get started. Okay, so here's the winch plate that I already made. Had it on my previous JL with factory steel bumper. And what I just did was kind of gave it a nose job. I took almost an inch off of the front of this because this was originally designed to match up to a factory front bumper and bolt right to it. So I wanted to get more approach angle. So I just took an inch off of this. Set the front back towards the winch closer. Yeah, we're talking about cutting these pieces for the frame horn. This is what's called the frame horn. It's where your bumper bolts on. Very end of the frame. We got holes marked out here. Drill this out. So getting ready to do here is make plates for the bumper itself to mount. And it's going to mount to, of course, the front of the winch plate directly behind the factory hooks. So I'm still going to use these factory hooks. And the bolts for the factory hooks will go through the bumper and the winch plate into the frame horn. All right, so we're going to drill holes in the bumper plate. And mark these off, center punched them. So let me right about where I want them. And we just line this up using a center drill here. Using a cutting wax. Product's made by LPS. And there you have it. We have all 4 holes drilled. Drill the other plate. Got our holes drilled for our bumper mounting plate. So we're going to install the winch plate with the bolts that go inside the frame rail to hold it up into place. So we can going to need to use it to build the new bumper basically around the winch plate. So it's going to be integrated together. Okay, so here we are. This is our front plate for the bumper. You notice I have a piece of 3/16 tack welded to it, perpendicular. It's because 3/16 is still very flexible. It will bow, warp from welding. So I have this clamped onto the winch plate. Winch plate's mounted. Next thing we need to do is we've got to weld pieces, one right here, one on the other side of this hook, and same on the other side. We need to box this in where this hook is at, because that's going to be our actual mount to the frame. It'll also bolt to the winch plate, but that's not necessarily the mount, the strength of the bumper and everything. So we get those 4 pieces cut next. We can get those tacked into place. Then we can get it unclamped from the winch plate and get that portion welded up. All right, so just welded on the shackle mounts onto the base plate. This is the base plate of the bumper. Both sides welded on. This is all going to get boxed. It's going to weld ears out on both sides of the plate. That base plate there, they're also going to weld to the bumper. So it's all going to get boxed in completely. And then the shackle mounts will also get welded to, of course, the face of the bumper. Making the cutouts for the shackle mounts to the front bumper plate.
It all cut out.
So I'm trying out my new Milwaukee steel cutting circular saw. This thing's pretty awesome. Actually, I really like it. It's great. If you want a nice finished edge, it's the way to go. If you use a plasma cutter, you always have some grinding finish up work to do. If you use this saw, I really like it.
That's where we're at now. I just tack welded these pieces on either side because we're going to box this whole thing in. Basically is how this is going to end up. We're just going to weld this all in for our hooks. Do that on both sides. Just have everything, I'm getting everything tacked into place. I just cut this piece. It goes underneath the bumper at an angle for our skid. It goes from the bumper down under to protect the sway bar disconnect. So I'm getting ready to drill these holes, and then we're going to weld on these nuts so we can bolt that lower skid on under the bumper separately.
Using LPS Edge wax lube.
Okay, now we're going to weld nuts to the back side of this plate. This plate gets welded to the bottom side of the bumper to bolt our skid that goes underneath to protect the sway bar disconnect and everything. So let's take a bolt and a nut, and I put some washers on this bolt so it won't stick through, so I don't get weld spatter on my thread, so I keep reusing this bolt. First, guys, take a wrench and just snug it down. I'm just going to put like 3 good solid tacks on them because all it is just to keep the nuts from turning, so you don't have to put a wrench up on underneath there to put the skid on. And another thing I do when I do these is I'll start the weld on the plate, get it hot, and then go up into the nut. You don't want to start on the nut first, you might get the nut too hot, and then you're going to distort the nut. Okay, we're going to do the last of the 7 nuts. All 7 nuts welded on. All right, this is the strip that we cut for the top of the bumper. I'm going to be cutting this out of the center where the winch goes. So I want a radius in there, so I did this with a 3/4 inch drill bit. Drilled that out. You can see the lines that are scribed there. That will get cut out then. Then we'll have a nice radius. Okay, so here's the finished piece that's going to go on top of the bumper, angled back towards the hooks. Got cut out there in the middle for the winch. And I notched on each side for the hooks. Give some clearance around those hooks and get this to angle back a little bit farther. So we got that piece done. Completely welded one side up. And all this, if you look at it, it's stitch weld. I do stitch welding to keep from warping this base plate. So I still have to weld up the other side. I'll show you how I do this, but basically you just move from side to side, from location to location, weld about 1 inch or so, maybe 1.5 inches. Whole idea is to keep from getting this 3/16 plate too hot, because then it's going to warp really bad. So I sprayed anti-spatter on my threads. I have hose clamps on 2 of my studs holding my hook up so I can get underneath of it. Started over here on the bottom. I didn't have a tack in that spot, so I wanted to start there. This is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to keep going around. I'm going to stop periodically once I get a few welds on so the whole thing can cool back off. I've done 4 of them, 2 on each side. I'll let it go for a little bit here, work on something else, let this cool back down. I'm doing this just to keep it from warping any of it. I did here and here last time. I'm going to do here and here this time, opposite on the other side. And that's it for a while again. That's it. All loaded up. Tack welded this piece on, so we can start getting measurements for the back piece. And that's what I did. And I made a template out of cardboard here. So that's basically the piece I'm going to cut for that. And then we can use this template for both sides. All right, I used my cardboard pattern that I made. Drew it all out on here. Drilled holes for the radiuses to go around the factory tow hook. Then the scribe line is where we're going to bend this, because this portion wraps around the side. Just want to get this all cut out. Okay, I've got it in the press brake, lined up. There it goes. All right, so we got it lined up. I'm going to start bending the piece. Yes, I have this just sitting on a dolly. Okay, so it bottomed out. It's as far as you can go. But I need this bent beyond 90 degrees. So I take this piece of metal here and I'm going to slide it in behind there, because this thing's designed to bend 90 degrees. So by doing that, we can bend it beyond 90. Precision alignment here. And you bottom it out again, as far as it'll go. There we go, it's bent. I'm doing about, what I'm after is 5 degrees beyond 90. So the side of the bumper isn't perpendicular to the top. We want it actually angled back a little bit. So that slipped in here. I'll bring it up to about where it is going to go. Pretty close to where it's going to end up. So I have to cut this corner off here at an angle. I'm going to need to grind that radius off there to match the radius inside of the bend. Actually about right there, I had it tilted up. So right there's about where it goes. We'll get that piece cut off to match up the angle. So you got a little bit of cutting to do here, a little narrow. So that's how you want to do it. To get everything to match up. You don't want to overcut, you want to undercut if anything. All right, so I got these pieces tack welded on to the main part of the bumper now. Top and sides on each end. Stitch welding the final bumper. Then it is complete. Okay, so we're working on the lower skid. Made this plate here. Bolted it on with button heads. Setting about 35 degrees from the face of the bumper, sloping down. I'm going to be cutting holes in that for the factory LED fog lights. So right now I got tabs clamped on so I can get the piece that goes underneath to just set on there. Help me hold it in place while I tack weld this. And it's going to go up against the bottom of those horns sticking down from the frame. Then we're going to have tabs on there that will weld to the bottom part of that skid. So basically the lower skid is going to be bolted on separate from the bumper to make it easy to access or do anything you need. Easier to take on and off, far less weight. Alright, so I've got the lower piece tacked on now. Already had this front piece bolted on there. So I've tacked the lower part to the front part. So I made some brackets to bolt to the frame here where this factory tin cheapy skid went with the plastic bumper. And I made up these plates here that are going to get nuts welded to the back side of them to bolt the skid from underneath. So I tack welded that plate to this piece. Then on the other side, I'll show later that I've got my brackets that I made for my winch plate. It's going to get welded to that as well, not just this front tab. Front tab really is mostly just to hold this in place till I get that welded up. So I've got to drop this back off. I'm going to drill holes because I marked where that plate actually is with marker. And then I'll drill holes, put it back on so I can mark exactly where they're at so we can drill through those plates and then weld the nut to the back side to hold this skid up from underneath. I also marked here where I've got to cut away on the corner. Make sure I got plenty of tire clearance. Right now I've got 1 inch, but I want more than that. So we're going to angle that. So here's our finished bumper. Actually been out driving it. It's got bugs all over it, but this is the finished bumper. A lot of compliments on it already, so just working on getting this lower skid finished up. So I made these lower skid plate mounts for the front bumper. Welded the front tab on here to utilize that hole. We also welded them to these brackets that I made here that are for my winch mount. See where they bolt to the winch mount? There's a bolt for the winch, so we're underneath the winch plate. And I already had these brackets made and bolting on to this frame section here that drops down. So I just welded these pieces on, and I've got nuts welded on the inside for bolting the lower skid, front bumper skid on each side here. Here's our lower skid. It's actually flipped upside down right now. All these holes here go into the bumper. And then these bottom holes go into the plates that I just made. Right now, we're cutting out this oval hole for my LED fog lights. You gotta freehand this. I don't have a good guide for it, so first thing I do is just plunge a hole out away from my line, because it tends to produce a lot of slag, and then we'll clean it up, and then we move over to the line and start following it around. And that's it. There's the piece we cut out. Pretty good. There's definitely going to be some cleanup, obviously, since I freehanded this. If you end up with any cuts deeper than what you really wanted, I take the MIG welder, tack in, fill it in as you're finishing this off. Because that way, if you get a deep cut, deeper than what your line was or where you really wanted it to be, if you get a little bit off, just fill it in with weld as you're cleaning this up. I got to cut this off, mainly for tire clearance. So there we are, got our finished holes for our fog lights to go in here. Just got to make up brackets for them yet to mount them. Yeah, I made up these brackets to hold my fog lights in here. Just cut them out on the bandsaw, bend them in the brake. Then I made up all these perimeter pieces here to go all the way around the edge. Get it all welded up yet, everything's just tack welded on at this point. Had to cut a notch out, clearance for the sway bar disconnect. It just happened to be in the way, so I'm going to weld another piece in behind that. So have as much strength there as what we would have had without notching it out. So we'll add an extra piece behind it. Alright, so here's the bumper lower skid. It's all done. Okay, so here's the finished bumper. I did button heads on the front, bolt it all together. Make this two-piece so it's easiest to work with. Underneath we got button head bolts. Blend onto those frame pieces that hang down. And I love it, actually. The fog lights work perfect right where they're at. I just love the looks of the factory hooks. Alright, let's conclude this video of making the front bumper and lower skid for the JLUR Diesel. Really like it so far. I love how the LEDs came out in the lower skid, so we're down low, a little closer like they were from the factory bumper with the lift, 37-inch tires and everything. So like how it all worked out. It's all tucked in nice and neat. Love how I have factory tow hooks yet. That was one of my things that I just wanted them on there. Whether you use them or not, I wanted it part of my bumpers. All right, well, like, subscribe, share. Appreciate y'all. Thank you. Take care.